The great question. Imagine this. You wake up one day to find that everything you were taught about strength was a lie. The posters that told you to be yourself, the influencers preaching self-love without discipline, the slogans screaming, "Accept who you are," all of it suddenly feels hollow, like whispers from a society that secretly wants you tame. You scroll through your feed and notice something strange. Mediocrity is celebrated. Excuses are dressed up as empowerment, and struggle is romanticized as an identity rather than a stepping stone. Everywhere you look, weakness is not just tolerated, it's rewarded. People post about their failures and gain applause. They confess their lack of ambition and call it authenticity. They reject responsibility and call it freedom. And you ask yourself, when did weakness become a virtue? When did society decide that comfort mattered more than greatness? Think about it. We live in an age where saying, "I can't," is met with sympathy instead of challenge, where discomfort is avoided at all costs, and where personal accountability is seen as oppressive rather than liberating. Is this progress, or is it a silent collapse? Could it be that society has created an invisible system that thrives on your fragility? Because here's the paradox. The weaker you become, the more dependent you are on the very structures that tell you you're perfect as you are. And dependence, after all, is profitable. What if I told you that the celebration of weakness is not an accident, but a design? That behind the hashtags of self-acceptance lies an economy built on your inertia, a culture that thrives on your reluctance to rise above your limitations? Look closely, and you'll see it. Comfort sold as happiness, indulgence marketed as self-care, conformity disguised as liberation. We are told to just be enough. But what does that really mean? Enough for what? Enough for a system that fears your strength because true strength cannot be controlled. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time you were rewarded for resilience instead of relatability? When was the last time society applauded you for enduring pain rather than escaping it? The truth is unsettling. Comfort has replaced courage as the ultimate virtue, and the world quietly conspires to keep it that way. Why? Because comfort breeds compliance, and compliance keeps the machine running. The illusion of empowerment keeps you passive, and the celebration of your weakness keeps you docile. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. Is this really who you are? Are you the person who seeks shelter in the applause of mediocrity? Or are you the one who senses that something is deeply wrong? That strength, true strength, has been buried beneath layers of sugar-coated lies. You feel it, don't you? That gnawing sense that the life you've been handed is too easy, too small, too safe. And yet, you're told this is good. That comfort is the prize. That fragility is humanity. But what if comfort is the cage and weakness the chains? What if the praise you receive for being real is not freedom but sedation? The uncomfortable truth is that the modern world doesn't want you to be strong. Strength is unpredictable, unprofitable, uncontrollable. A strong individual questions systems, resists manipulation, and seeks meaning beyond consumption. But a weak individual buys more, fears more, depends more. And so weakness becomes marketable, celebrated, institutionalized. Here's the paradox that will haunt you. The more you accept weakness as identity, the more you surrender strength as possibility. You begin to believe that fragility is authentic, that struggle without effort is noble, that limitations are sacred. And soon, you stop, asking the most dangerous question of all. What could I become if I refused to stay small? Now imagine a world where everyone chooses strength over comfort. What happens to the industries built on your self-doubt? What happens to the systems that profit from your fear? The answer is simple. They crumble, which is why they cannot let that happen. And so, the stage is set. You have been handed a story that says fragility is beauty, that avoidance of pain is wisdom, that complacency is peace. But deep down, you suspect the truth is different. You suspect the real path to freedom is not in avoiding the storm, but in walking straight into it. Are you ready to question everything they told you about weakness? Are you ready to ask why you've been rewarded for staying small? Because once you start pulling at this thread, the entire fabric of your reality begins to unravel. And that's where we begin. The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. To understand why weakness has become a celebrated trait in modern society, you must look beyond surface-level explanations and peer into the depths of human psychology and cultural conditioning. Weakness, in its essence, is not just physical frailty or lack of ability. It is the surrender of will, the avoidance of struggle, and the rejection of growth in exchange for temporary comfort. But why does this surrender feel so natural today? Why has it been woven into the very fabric of what we call progress? The answer lies in the interplay of two powerful forces, the human instinct for safety and the systemic desire for control. Let us start with you. At the core of your being lies a primal drive to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This is not a flaw, it is biology. Pain signals danger, pleasure signals survival. For our ancestors, this mechanism kept them alive in a hostile world. But in the modern age, where predators no longer lurk in the shadows, that same mechanism has been hijacked. Today, your brain still reacts to discomfort as if it were a life-threatening event. Stress at work, your nervous system floods with cortisol as though a tiger were stalking you. The temptation of instant gratification, your dopamine circuits light up like fireworks because to your brain, a sugary snack or a Netflix binge is a feast in the wilderness. In short, your survival instincts have become your prison, and society knows how to keep you locked inside. Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to confront in ourselves becomes our fate. He spoke of the shadow, those repressed parts of us that we deny and disown. In the shadow of the modern individual lives an unacknowledged truth, the deep hunger for meaning. But meaning is hard. It demands effort, sacrifice, and often suffering. And so, instead of facing that challenge, we numb ourselves with distractions, with validations, with illusions of progress. Here lies the psychological root of the problem. Weakness is easier than strength because strength requires confrontation with pain, and we have been conditioned to believe that pain is the enemy. Now add Nietzsche's insight into the mix, his declaration that modern morality often serves as a tool for the weak to restrain the strong. Think about the slogans you hear. You're perfect as you are. Don't push yourself too hard. Do what makes you happy. These sound liberating, but beneath their soft surface lies a quiet tyranny, the tyranny of mediocrity. Nietzsche argued that when a culture glorifies comfort and safety above all else, it breeds what he called the last man, a being who desires nothing more than a warm bed, a full stomach, and endless entertainment, a being who has traded greatness for security. Look around and ask yourself, do we not live in an age designed for the last man? But why would society encourage such a state? The answer is as pragmatic as it is disturbing. Weak individuals are predictable. They do not revolt. They do not question. They do not threaten the status quo. They consume. They follow. They obey. A strong individual, one who embraces discomfort, resists conformity, and seeks meaning, cannot be easily manipulated. This is why systems of power, whether economic or cultural, find it convenient to nurture your fragility, because fragility breeds dependence, and dependence ensures loyalty. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. To escape pain, people rush toward comfort. To escape boredom, they seek distractions. And so, modern life oscillates between these two poles, never breaking free from the cycle, because breaking free requires the one thing society fears most: awakening. When you awaken to your strength, you no longer need to be sedated by endless conveniences. You no longer need to seek identity in weakness because you begin to build it in resilience. But here is the cruel irony. The very movements that claim to liberate you often tighten the chains. Consider the commodification of self-care. What began as a call for mental and physical well-being has morphed into an industry that profits from your inertia. They sell you candles, creams, and cozy slogans, not because they care about your peace, but because every purchase keeps you passive. Or take the rise of body positivity campaigns. While they began as a rejection of toxic beauty standards, a noble cause, they now often veer into celebrating unhealthy choices as empowerment, discouraging any pursuit of growth, Because growth is uncomfortable. The hidden psychological trap is this: you are rewarded for staying small. You gain likes, sympathy, validation for your struggles, for your victimhood, for your helplessness. The moment you declare, "I am fine as I am," the world applauds. But declare, "I will strive for more," and suddenly the applause grows quiet. Why? Because your strength through eatens the fragile illusion others cling to. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation, and nothing unsettles mediocrity like the presence of greatness. This is why the modern narrative feels so comforting yet so dangerous. It whispers, "You deserve rest." And yes, you do. But it leaves out the second half. Rest from what? From a life of striving or a life of sedation? It tells you, choose happiness, but never asks whether happiness without growth is even real happiness at all. It insists, be authentic. But what if your authenticity today is shaped by fear rather than freedom? The truth is this: society does not simply reward your weakness by accident. It institutionalizes it, moralizes it, and markets it. And because you crave belonging, you comply. Because you fear rejection, you conform. Because you dread pain, you submit. This is the hidden problem: a system that convinces you that the cage is a sanctuary, that dependence is empowerment, that surrender is self-love. And if that unsettles you, good. Because the worst prison is the one you do not see. And now that you've seen the bars, you cannot unsee them. The question is, what happens if you refuse to stay inside? And that brings us to the consequences, the unseen cost of this fragile existence. The unseen consequences. What happens when weakness becomes a cultural currency? When fragility is not only normalized, but celebrated? The answer is not immediate chaos. It's something far more insidious, a slow erosion of the human spirit, a quiet hollowing out of what makes life meaningful. On the surface, everything appears fine. People smile in selfies, proclaim their authenticity, and boast of their self-acceptance. But beneath that digital gloss lies a gnawing emptiness, a discontent too uncomfortable to acknowledge. Because deep down, we all know the truth. Weakness may feel safe, but it does not satisfy. Safety is not the same as purpose. Comfort is not the same as fulfillment. And when a society builds its foundation on weakness, the cost is staggering. Let's start with the personal cost. What it does to you, the individual. At first, the rewards of weakness feel intoxicating. Post about your struggles, and people applaud your vulnerability. Share your lack of ambition as choosing peace, and they flood you with affirmations. Skip the hard work in the name of self-love, and no one questions you because questioning feels like cruelty in this new moral order. And yet, despite the applause, you can't shake the restlessness. Because validation without growth is a sugar rush for the soul, sweet for a moment, empty thereafter. You wake up one day realizing you have spent years building comfort but not character, collecting likes but not legacy, chasing happiness but never tasting meaning. The psychological toll of this comfort culture is immense. Modern life has gifted us unprecedented ease. Food on demand, endless entertainment, algorithms that predict our desires before we even feel them. But what has this ease done to us? It has robbed us of the one ingredient essential for strength: struggle. Growth is forged in friction. Muscles only strengthen through resistance. Minds only sharpen through challenge. Souls only deepen through suffering. Remove the friction, and you remove the very process that transforms weakness into strength. So when society pampers you into perpetual comfort, it does more than make you lazy. It makes you fragile. And fragility, in a world as unpredictable as ours, is a death sentence disguised as security. But it doesn't stop there. Weakness doesn't just affect you, it infects the collective. When enough individuals surrender to mediocrity, culture itself begins to bend toward the lowest common denominator. Standards fall. Excellence becomes elitism. Ambition becomes arrogance. Suddenly, striving is offensive, discipline is oppressive, and greatness is suspect. This is the cultural climate we inhabit today, where calling someone to rise above themselves is framed as judgment, where expecting more is labeled toxic, where discomfort, the very birthplace of transformation, is treated as violence. Do you see the danger? When weakness becomes virtue, strength becomes vice. And this inversion has consequences beyond the personal. It shapes politics, education, art, and morality. Our leaders, instead of challenging us to be more, pander to our insecurities. Schools, instead of fostering resilience, shield children from the slightest adversity. Art, instead of stirring the soul, soothes it into numbness. Even morality becomes a tool to protect comfort at all costs, recasting strength as oppression and struggle as trauma. The result? A society incapable of greatness because greatness requires the very things we now fear: pain, risk, sacrifice. And what happens to a world allergic to hardship when real hardship arrives? Because make no mistake, it will. History is merciless in this regard. Comfort does not last forever. Economies crash, pandemics spread, conflicts ignite. When that moment comes, what kind of people will stand? The ones raised on dopamine hits and moral slogans? Or the ones who embraced discomfort, who built strength not because they were forced to, but because they chose to? The answer is obvious and terrifying. Yet the most profound consequence of this worship of weakness is spiritual, not practical. Because weakness, at its root, is not about failing physically or emotionally. It is about refusing the call to become who you are capable of being. Carl Jung wrote that the greatest burden of life is the unfulfilled self, the unlived life. And that is precisely the tragedy of a world that rewards weakness. It robs you of your potential under the guise of kindness. It hands you approval. And what you need is challenge. It tells you to stay as you are when the deepest truth of existence whispers, become more. But how can you become more when every voice around you insists that wanting more is wrong? This is the silent suffocation of modernity, the erasure of aspiration in the name of acceptance. And it is killing us softly. Anxiety, depression, and despair are skyrocketing not because people expect too much of themselves, but because they expect too little. They have mistaken sedation for peace, distraction for joy, weakness for love, and in this confusion, they feel hollow, and they cannot explain why. Now imagine a future where this trajectory continues unchecked. A generation raised on dopamine loops, incapable of enduring silence. A culture allergic to criticism, mistaking it for cruelty. A society that worships comfort so much that it legislates against struggle. It sounds dystopian, but is it not already here? Is this not the age of outrage where the smallest discomfort sparks moral panic? The age of safe spaces, where even ideas are seen as violence. The age where achievement is envied, not admired, because it reminds us of what we could have been if we had not chosen the easier path. This is the unseen cost, a slow death of the will, a silent burial of the heroic impulse that once drove humanity forward. We traded strength for softness, resilience for reassurance, meaning for momentary pleasure. And now we wander, restless and numb, wondering why life feels so empty even as it has never been more comfortable. But here is the question you must wrestle with. Is it too late to turn back? Or is there still time to rebel against this culture of weakness? That answer, and the path to reclaiming your strength, begins with a single radical decision. And that is what we uncover next. The rebellion. And how to break free the rebellion. How to break free. The rebellion does not begin in the streets. It does not start with slogans or movements or revolutions that make headlines. It begins in the smallest, quietest, most overlooked battlefield of all, the human soul. Your soul. The war against weakness is not fought with fists, it is fought with choices. The choices you make when no one is watching. When the world whispers for you to settle and you dare to say no. That is where the rebellion starts. In defiance of everything that numbs, sedates, and shrinks you. The first step is brutally simple. You must stop believing the lie that comfort equals happiness. This is the cornerstone of modern weakness, the belief that the good life is the easy life. But the ancients knew better. The Stoics taught that the path to virtue runs through hardship. Nietzsche declared that one must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Even Viktor Frankl, speaking from the depths of a concentration camp, wrote that suffering, when given meaning, is the foundation of life's greatest strength. They all knew what we have forgotten. Comfort without struggle breeds emptiness, not joy. So the first act of rebellion is to embrace discomfort, to seek it not as punishment, but as purification. How do you do this in a world that sells you sedation at every turn? Start by taking back the one thing society fears you will reclaim: discipline. Discipline is freedom in disguise. It is the power to say no when everything urges you to say yes. Yes to laziness, yes to distraction, yes to the seductive pull of mediocrity. Begin with something small. Wake up earlier than you want to. Put your phone down when your mind craves the dopamine hit of scrolling. Do the work that terrifies you instead of the work that flatters you. Each act of discipline is a blow against the empire of weakness. But discipline alone is not enough. You must confront the shadow, the part of you that delights in weakness because weakness feels safe. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Your shadow wants comfort because comfort means no risk of failure, no risk of rejection, no risk of pain. But in avoiding those risks, you also avoid life. So drag that shadow into the light. Ask yourself, where am I hiding? What excuses have I dressed up as virtues? What dreams have I abandoned in the name of self-acceptance? Write them down, stare at them until the shame burns, then turn that shame into fuel. The next step is to reclaim an idea that modern culture has almost made taboo: aspiration. We live in an age that treats ambition like a sin and mediocrity like a moral good. Do not fall for it. The call to greatness is not arrogance. It is obedience to the deepest law of life, the law of becoming. Everything in nature strives upward. Seeds push through soil, rivers carve through rock, stars collapse into brilliance. Why should you be the only thing that does not evolve? Your desire to rise is not toxic, it is sacred. So name your highest ideal and start moving toward it, even if every voice around you says, just be enough. Enough for whom? For what? Refuse that ceiling, shatter it. And then comes the hardest, most liberating act of all: choose pain. Not unnecessary suffering, not chaos for its own sake, but the kind of pain that refines you. Run when you want to lie down. Speak the truth when silence would be safer. Pursue mastery when mediocrity would earn applause. In that crucible of chosen pain, weakness dies and strength is born. You will not find this message in the slogans plastered across social media, because strength cannot be commodified, and the system cannot profit from your independence. That is why this path feels lonely at first, because true rebellion always does. But here is the paradox that will change everything. The moment you embrace struggle, the chains of weakness begin to fall. You stop craving validation because your worth is no longer outsourced to applause. You stop fearing discomfort because discomfort becomes your ally. And slowly you awaken to a truth that every philosopher worth their ink has whispered across time. Life's deepest joy is not in ease but in the conquest of difficulty. And what about society? This great machine that feeds on your fragility. You cannot dismantle it alone, but you can starve it. Every time you refuse the seduction of weakness, you take back power from the system that thrives on your dependence. Every act of resilience is an act of rebellion. Every ounce of strength you reclaim sends a ripple through the culture of softness. And one day, perhaps, enough ripples will become a tide. But until then, the rebellion begins and ends with you. Will you choose the easy applause of mediocrity or the silent, soul-shaping fire of greatness? Will you trade the narcotic of comfort for the intoxicating agony of growth? These are not rhetorical questions. They are choices. Your choices. And when you make them, something extraordinary happens. You stop being the last man Nietzsche feared and become the one he dreamed of, the one who says yes to life, who embraces struggle, who turns chaos into creation. That is freedom. That is power. That is the path out of weakness. But even this is not the end. Because there is one more truth, the ultimate truth, that most will never see. And without it, even rebellion can become another illusion. That is what we face next, the final, most dangerous realization. Are you ready for it? The ultimate truth The final, most powerful realization. You've torn down the illusions. You've seen how society sedates you, how weakness is rewarded because it serves the machinery of control. You've taken the first steps toward rebellion, embracing discomfort, reclaiming discipline, rejecting mediocrity. And yet, there is one final truth that will either shatter everything you've built or solidify your transformation. It is this. Weakness is not just something society gives you. Weakness is something you choose. And the most terrifying revelation is that you have been complicit all along. This is not a truth the world will tell you because it strips away the comforting narrative of victimhood. It's easier to believe that weakness is imposed upon you than to admit you have participated in your own diminishment. But if you are brave enough to look, you will see it. Every time you chose comfort over challenge, silence over truth, distraction over purpose, you were voting for your own chains. No government, no culture, no algorithm can enslave you without your consent. Yes, they tempt you. Yes, they profit from your inertia. But in the end, you opened the door. And here is where most people turn back, because this truth feels like a burden. But in reality, it is the greatest liberation you will ever know. If you chose weakness, then you can choose strength. If you surrendered once, you can rise now. The power is yours, and it always has been. Society can reward your weakness, but it cannot force you to stay weak. That decision rests with you. But let's go even deeper. Why do you choose weakness? Why does anyone? The answer is not simple cowardice. It is something darker, something that hides in the corridors of the human psyche. Carl Jung would call it the shadow. Nietzsche would call it ressentiment. It is the part of you that envies what it cannot become, that resents the struggle of greatness, that finds secret pleasure in failure because failure absolves you of responsibility. This is why weakness feels seductive. It frees you from the weight of your potential, because to fully embrace your strength is to confront an unbearable truth, that you are capable of more than you have dared to live. And that is terrifying. Think of it. What if you actually gave everything? What if you stripped away every excuse, every distraction, every soft pillow of comfort and stood naked before your own possibility? You would have no one to blame. No system, no childhood, no algorithm, only you, and the mountain you were born to climb. That is why weakness persists. It keeps the mountain hidden behind clouds of excuses, and society, ever eager to profit from your avoidance, sells you the fog as freedom. But the fog can only blind you if you choose to keep your eyes closed. And here lies the ultimate truth. Strength is not a gift. It is not something you wait for or wish for or hope to find. It is forged. It is earned in the fires of resistance, hammered in the blows of discipline, sharpened in the grit of discomfort. You cannot buy it. You cannot outsource it. You can only become it. And the moment you realize this, truly realize it, you see through the great deception. Weakness was never safety. It was always the slowest form of death. So what now? Now, you stand at the edge of a choice so profound it will define the rest of your life. You can turn back, slide into the warm, narcotic haze of comfort. Let society keep stroking your fragility until you dissolve into nothingness. Or you can step forward, into the storm, into the fire, into the unrelenting crucible of becoming. This is not poetic exaggeration. This is reality. Every day you live is an election between two futures, the life of the last man or the life of the one who dares to rise. And do not be fooled. Rebellion is not a single act. It is not a dramatic moment of triumph with cheering crowds and fireworks. It is the daily, lonely work of choosing strength when weakness would be easier. It is the decision to sweat when you could rest, to create when you could consume, to speak truth when silence would protect you. It is 1,000 small crucifixions endured without applause, and yet, on the other side of that suffering, something magnificent emerges, a self you can respect, a life that means something, a strength no system can sedate. This is the truth most will never embrace. They will continue to trade greatness for comfort, freedom for validation, strength for sedation, and they will call it happiness. But you know now. You have seen the architecture of your cage. You have felt the chains in your own hands, and if you have the courage to break them, no force on earth can stop you. So I leave you with this question, the question that will echo in your mind long after this moment passes. Will you choose the easy death of weakness, or the hard, blazing life of strength? The world will reward your weakness, but only you can reward your strength. The choice is yours. Make it.